All right, we're gonna make a lot of people angry with this video today, because I'm telling you guys what, there's a lot of hot takes out there about the Harley Davidson Softail Street Bob, and guess what? You're all wrong. Every single one of you is wrong about this motorcycle. Alright everybody, what is up? What is up? As always, thanks for stopping by to another video today. We are out on the Harley Street Bob on the streets of Philadelphia. We are out on the lovely Kelly Drive today, and man, I'm excited to finally get this bike out for what hopefully should be a full day of riding, because one of my last previous videos, you guys probably saw me pick this thing up from storage. Haven't had it too much. I've been bopping around town, you know, simple stuff, running some errands. Weather's been hit or miss. I think I got it to work a day or two, but today we are off work. Not the nicest day. It's a little cloudy, but it's warm enough, so I'm going to take this thing out all day for a ride. Probably get out to the suburbs, maybe hit up a Harley shop. Who knows what we'll get into. But I'm excited to finally be able to get a whole day of riding in on this thing. It has been way too long since we have been on the Harley Street Bob. And I tell you what, man, this Harley Street Bob, something I got to talk to a lot of you guys out there, is because I'm telling you what, there is a lot of misconceptions and wrong opinions out there on this motorcycle, and I'm going to go through them. I'm going to tell you what they are and why they're wrong. And if you are someone who has ever had one of these opinions on this bike, I'm going to tell you exactly why you're wrong, because I see it over and over. There's very specific things that people say about this bike and what it should be and what it does and all this different stuff. And I'm sorry, but you guys are just wrong, and there's a couple reasons why. And so the reason I started thinking about all this in the first place is because obviously I have the bike. Even before I had the bike, I was very interested in it. So naturally, I'm floating around the internet, reading articles, watching videos, all that good stuff. And I just kept seeing the same common themes over and over about the Street Bob. Like, a lot of people say these things about the Street Bob. Well, we're going to hop off the bike here in a little bit, and I'm going to run through those in just a minute. But I would see the same things, whether it was like articles online, people commenting on YouTube videos, Instagram posts about the bike. There's all these little things people say that the Harley Street Bob should have. The Harley should have done this, Harley should have done that. Like, yeah, everybody's got their hot takes, all their hot opinions when bikes come out and different stuff like that. Things that they think should be done to the bike or on the bike, ways that they think the bike should be. But there's reasons that this particular bike, the Harley Street Bob, shouldn't have or do those things that a lot of people say, because that would totally defeat the purpose of what this bike is. So you might already starting to be like formulating what some of those things might be. And like I said, we'll hop off and run through those in just a minute. Because what people like to do is they like to compare this bike to other bikes in the lineup, or you know, how they think the bike should be built out, or what people are going to end up doing with it aftermarket anyways. But there's very specific reasons why I think Harley did the things they did with this bike, and why they didn't do certain things, because it would make it way too similar to other bikes in the lineup. You know, a lot of people say, oh, this bike needs this, or such and such bike has this, like why wouldn't they put it on the Street Bob too? Or, oh, you know, you can't do this with the Street Bob, or, you know, they should have done this, put this on it, this and that. And like, yeah, I get it, you want certain things from the factory, whatever, but this is what I'm going to tell all you guys out there, all you guys and girls that have the opinions on the Street Bob of what it should have and shouldn't have. You're all just wrong. And that's my opinion. You guys are all wrong, and Harley absolutely nailed this bike and crushed this bike. It's an awesome bike, exactly what it is and what it's supposed to be. Now obviously, could I potentially be a little biased because I own one and I love it? I've always been interested in it. Yes, maybe. But obviously the time has now come. We're gonna hop off this thing, and once again, sorry if I offend anybody out there if you've had these takes or opinions on this bike, but here we go. We're gonna hop off this thing. I'm gonna tell you guys why you're all wrong if you've ever said this about the Harley Davidson Street Bob. All right. So like I said, we have hopped off the bike here. And so take a look at the bike. And obviously what we have here is a 2022 Harley Davidson Street Bob. So think about the essence of the bike itself. A Street Bob is supposed to be a bobber. Obviously Harley has turned this thing into like a bobber style muscle cruiser type bike, midweight style stripped down bobber cruiser essentially. And so with that said, we think about that, like, what is a bobber? What is the definition of a bobber? It's simple, very simplistic, stripped down, chopped up, very simple, obviously, not a whole lot of features, maybe not even necessarily performance and stuff like that. So with that said, the essence of the bike, like I said, is like a bobber cruiser style bike. So what you would expect with the bike is, you know, obviously very simple, stripped down, not a lot of technology, not a lot of features, great engine obviously with the 114, so you got some performance and stuff like that. But the overall gist of the Street Bob is bobber cruiser, so you don't have a lot of that performance type stuff that people might be thinking that they should have. So like I said, where everybody I see online comes in wrong with this bike is all the stuff that they say it should have. And I'm sorry, but if you say it should have these things, you are wrong. So what are those? Some of those things, starting up here at the front. So everybody I see comes in and says, oh, it needs dual disc, Well, why does it need dual disc brakes? It's a bobber style bike. You got your single disc brakes up front, totally sufficient to stop this bike. I mean, yeah, it's got a lot of power. It weighs about, 640 pounds. This thing stops this bike perfectly fine because, yeah, you can throw this bike around and do whatever you want with it, ride it hard. This front brake is fully capable of stopping this bike however you want to ride it. So a lot of people say, oh, I should have the same setup as like a Lowrider S, get the dual disc brakes up front here. I mean, it's a bobber. It doesn't need dual disc brakes. And so then the next thing I hear people say all the time comes up into the front forks. Everybody says, oh, this thing needs inverted front suspension. Why? Like I said, it's a bobber. You're not riding this thing for performance. If you are getting this Street Bob, you kind of should know already in advance what to expect. It's not necessarily a performance bike. They're calling this a Street Bob, bobber cruiser from the factory. Everybody says, oh, it needs inverted suspension, better performance up front. Same thing as the dual disc brakes. I disagree. As a bobber cruiser motorcycle, this thing does not need inverted front suspension. Now, as I talk about these things, you're going to start to hear a lot of similarities of what I'm thinking of, what you might be thinking that I'm comparing this thing to. As you already heard, a lot of people say dual discs up front, they should have inverted suspension. A lot of people say it needs a bigger tank too. So the Street Bob comes with a 3.5 gallon tank, the Softail Street Bob, that is 3.5 gallon tank right here. For me, I've noticed I've been getting like 130 miles to a tank, I would say. If I'm in the city, it's about 100. If I'm doing general riding, I can get about 130, and that's totally fine with me because, again, you're expecting a bobber style motorcycle. You're not going to have a big tank here. A lot of people say, oh, it needs a bigger tank. It needs like a 5 gallon tank, 6 gallon tank. Well, I mean, that totally defeats the purpose of a bobber. Like I said, you don't have bobbers with dual disc, inverted front forks, and big 5 gallon tanks. At that point, it's no longer a bobber. So next up, also with the digital gauge here, I'm actually a really big fan of this gauge. One of the reasons I like this bike so much, it's clean, it's sleek, exactly what you would expect from a bobber. You don't have the big bulky gauges on the tank or up here anywhere. It's so minimalistic down here. Actually love this thing. Cycle through some of the information here. It gives you everything you need right here. Trip A, trip B, your range, your fuel, time. I actually need to set that there. RPMs read out digitally, your miles per hour, all that stuff. A lot of other little lights and indicators down here. So again, you're going for that bobber look with this motorcycle, stripped down, very minimalistic and very simple. And obviously, like I said, and I've been saying all along, I think it's wrong to say or have the opinion that this bike needs those features, because at that point, it's no longer a bobber. And what does it sound like it is with all those things I just mentioned? A Lowrider S. So think about that. If you go ahead and put dual discs on here inverted front end, bigger tank like 5 gallons, put gauges on here, you basically literally just have the Lowrider S at this point. So what would be the point of calling this the Street Bob? If Harley wants to have 2 separate bikes on this Softail platform and have them be different enough, this bobber is built perfectly the way that it's supposed to be, because like I said, it's a bobber style cruiser motorcycle. You don't necessarily need a dual discs up front, inverted forks, you don't need that, bigger tank. At that point, it's no longer a bobber. At that point, you're literally right back into a Lowrider S basically. And that's what I started to think about as I started to see so many people online say these things like, oh, it needs dual disc, invert the front end for the price you're paying, it needs a bigger tank, it needs gauges, all that stuff. But to me, personally, in my opinion, that just doesn't necessarily make any sense, because that just makes it a Lowrider S at this point. If you want a Lowrider S with dual disc, inverted, bigger tank, different gauges, get a Lowrider S. You get a Street Bob because you want a Street Bob. You want the bobber style cruiser. You don't necessarily care about the performance of the Lowrider S, which was in my case. That's why I love this bike, love the stance, love the look of it. I didn't need all that extra stuff. So yeah, that's a little bit of my opinion on the bike here, and why I think people are wrong when they say that it needs that stuff, because I really don't think it does. I think the bike is set up perfectly the way it is as a bobber style cruiser motorcycle, because once you start going into all those other different little details, it's a totally different bike. At that point, it's literally a Lowrider S in my opinion. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. I used to see that stuff online all the time, all the way from, you know, Instagram, YouTube, articles online, everybody down in the comments, oh, it needs this, it needs that, it needs this, like, it's not worth it if it doesn't have this and this and this. I'm like, well, that's not the point. That's not what it is. The Street Bob is the Street Bob. It's designed like this for a reason. If you want those other things, you get the Lowrider S. It's the same platform. Obviously, it's got a little bigger engine now, but literally the same frame with all that different stuff on it. Go ahead and just get the Lowrider S if that stuff is important to you. So once again, sorry if I've offended anyone out there, but sometimes you just got to throw the truth out there. This bike does not need those things because it would no longer be a bobber. So I think that is going to wrap this one up for now. Let me know down in the comments what you think of those. If you do think it needs those items, why wouldn't you just get a Lowrider S? Let me know what you think of the bike overall. If you think I'm an idiot, if you think I'm crazy, go ahead and tell me down in the comments. But that is going to wrap this one up for now. As always, make sure you guys ride safe out there. Make it a good one, guys. It's the Moto John. We'll see y'all on down the road. Peace.